Hello, everyone. 2024 ended up being a pretty busy year for the music industry. We saw a lot of heavy hitters put out albums and projects. And, I'm reminding myself of where we were a year ago at the beginning of 2024. And I remember filming a video similar to this one and thinking, gosh, things seem a little slow right now. I'm wondering, maybe I'm a little worried that this is going to be a slow year. Which didn't end up being the case at all. As January rolled through and February, we got through the winter, we started seeing a lot of projects be announced. And I'm hoping that a similar trend ensues for 2025. I am filming this on January 4th. So if there are any big announcements that happen before this gets uploaded, I doubt there will be, but, just for that, for the record statement. And so I want to once again, talk about my predictions for album releases in 2025, but also really kind of harp on my hopes, what I hope is going to happen, because at the end of the day, when you call something predictions, a lot of it is imbued in that. Like, you're just wanting something to happen. But I am also kind of looking at, what we have to kind of point as evidence of something imminent coming from a lot of these artists. So I'm going to start out by talking about, artists that we already have confirmed. They already have albums on the calendar. Then I'll go through the predictions from most to least likely and end with some of the ones that I feel like are less likely, but I'm still hopeful for. And so we'll see if there usually is at least one or two artists that come each year that I'm not necessarily expecting to, but it's like so exciting that they finally came back from such a long hiatus. One thing I want to start out though by talking about is a trend that I have been noticing in the last several years, which is that I'm starting to get a little worried that traditional album releases, are becoming less desirable and incentivized for a lot of more sort of seasoned career musicians who have put out albums for at least 10 years, more like 15, 20, really, if we're being honest. But I'm seeing it from some artists who are only 10 years into their career already. Something that I don't think we used to see so much of. I feel like the lifespan of a recording artist is shrinking. And so what I mean by that is I'm looking at, the trend of how frequently are people putting out albums? Are musicians, particularly, I'm looking in the pop space. So I'm talking about pop artists, electronic music artists, dance artists. And I'm trying to sort of like predict, what is the traditional album cycle? The gap between albums is usually between 2 to 3 years. That has been traditionally like the average. And I think that we're starting to see that change. I think that what we're starting to see a lot more of is artists who are being actually more hyperactive, kind of clogging or oversaturating the airspace. And so we've got certain artists who are actually releasing music more frequently than the average. And that's always happened, but I feel like we're starting to see instead of there always being just that one or two, those artists who just popping out an album every single year, sometimes multiple albums a year. That was something that, was very common for like an artist like Celine Dion back in the 90s. I mean, she put out an album like almost every single year. Dolly Parton in the 70s, she put out an album almost every single year. So we've always seen that, but then the average artist has been 2 to 3 years. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing more of the average being either in extremes of one direction. So we either have artists who are releasing albums almost every single year. Think of like Drake, Taylor Swift. And then we have artists who are on the other side, increasingly going possibly 3 to 5 years, maybe even longer, between their releases. We're starting to see more and more artists take longer and longer to come back. Just look at Katy Perry and Lady Gaga as prime examples. And although I think you could argue that that's common for artists once they get into their 40s, although granted, some of these artists like Lady Gaga are not yet in their 40s, they're still in their late 30s. I think if we look back at the career of like Madonna, for example, Madonna didn't start really slowing down until she was almost 60. Madonna is finally taking the longest hiatus she's ever taken in her career, being 5+ years between records. When she's 65, 66 years old, that's a little more understandable. She didn't slow down when she hit her late 30s. She did not slow down even when she was close to 50. She was still putting out albums at least somewhat on a 3 to 4 year cycle, which was pretty consistent with how she had been releasing when she was in her 20s or 30s. So when you compare that to artists like Lady Gaga and Katy Perry today, you see they're starting to fall behind. And so it's not just them, it's a lot of them. A lot of them are starting to really take longer and longer hiatuses. And that's really sad. And I think there are a lot of factors at play with that. I think that the financial incentive or financial potential issue that might come up from recording a full length album is starting to become an issue for a lot of artists and record labels. I think we're starting to see a lot of different areas and avenues that were traditionally a little more lucrative for those in the music industry start to dry up. The music video is probably the most noticeable. We are not seeing the same level of budget being spent or even the quantity of music videos that we once used to see from a lot of pop artists today. Nelly Furtado, for example, did not make a single actual music video for her last album. And that was probably a decision made between her and her record label, knowing their realistic album sales they were looking at, which I think 10 years ago they would have done anyway. They would have put the money behind it. But we're in a different landscape. In the landscape of TikTok and YouTube Shorts, music videos are a, dying breed, and that's really, really sad. But so are full-length albums. We're seeing more EPs, more mixtapes. Albums traditionally, especially, this has always been something in the more like urban scene that's been a little bit more less traditionally kind of considered. But we're starting to see it in the pop sphere as well, in that artists are trying to kind of they're doing deluxes instead of putting out new music. Like SZA, for example, put out basically an entire new album, but disguised it as a deluxe to an album that came out 2 years ago. Which, I guess you could say, hey, we still got the new music, so I'm not going to complain. But it's like, there must be some sort of financial incentive to doing that. I really don't think that, SZA would have done that and would have just made it an entirely new project if there wasn't possibly a way that made it cheaper to make. Maybe a little bit more also of a increase in revenue for her. Like, since it's tied to the original record, there was just more sales. I feel like, and that increases the price point. I think that that's something we're seeing now. And so I think deluxes are getting a little out of control. We need to stop adding deluxe songs onto an album 6 months after its release. Let's put the deluxe on when it was originally came out. It used to be the fact that day of the release date was when all the songs came out, and maybe they would just float around on the internet because they were only released in Japan or something. But we didn't get them like 4 or 5, 6, 8 months later. I don't know. I'm just seeing this as a trend. So with all that being said, when I look at 2025, I got a ton of artists that I'm hoping for because a lot of them are seriously overdue. But that's becoming a longer and longer list, and I'm starting to think, well, I think some of these artists may come through, but others, I'm starting to wonder if their careers, they're just not about it anymore. Let's start by talking about what do we actually know is coming so far. First of all, the first big album release that I see on the calendar is on January 24th, FKA Twigs' Eusexual. If you watched my Best Songs of the Year video I just put out, am extremely excited for this project. And if you had told me a year ago that an FKA Twigs album would be one of my most highly anticipated of the upcoming year, I might have scratched my head a little bit and said, Magdalene was okay, but I wasn't really that into it. I tried to get into Magdalene. I really did. But outside of 1 or 2 tracks, I just wasn't feeling it. Eusexual is on a completely different planet to Magdalene. Even though I see the through line of FKA Twigs' vocal delivery, her sensibility towards her art, but they are completely different projects and genre. And the pop sensibility of Eusexual is too irresistible to deny. Even though I know that this is going to be a very experimental and avant-garde album, calling it a classic pop album might not necessarily be the correct, way to classify it. But at the end of the day, this is probably her most accessible pop record. And so looking at the visuals, looking at the campaign, Eusexual is looking to be a real tour de force for FKA Twigs. An artist who I slept on for far too long, who I knew floated around in the alternative circles, and people talked about being, the 2010s version of Björk. Well, now I sort of do see it. I will probably review the album on my channel. So that's probably the first album review you will see of the year at the end of this month. Really, really excited for it. We've got 3 songs so far. I'm hoping we get another one before its album release. The next big album that we do have definitely on the calendar is coming from Tate McRae, So Close to What, in February. Now, I really do believe that Tate McRae is the second coming of Britney Spears. I think based on this album so far, what we've heard, shout out to Two Hands. That song is really a moment. It's a tune, I will say that. I think Tate McRae is really the most, out of all of the young pop starlets, most carrying the spirit of early Britney Spears. And so I am anticipating an album that could potentially be up there with In the Zone or Blackout, based on what we've heard so far from these 2 singles. So I'm anticipating it. I'm excited. I'm excited to see where Tate McRae takes us. There's one other pop girl, new pop girl, this Gen Z pop girl I'm excited about, but we don't have an album release date yet for her. I'll talk about her in a second. And then we also have Lana Del Rey. Lana Del Rey had, probably way sooner than any of us expected, released, put out an Instagram photo shoot that basically confirmed, although I think some of us may wonder if things may change, because it was so far out, that her next studio album will be called The Right Person Will Stay and will be released on May 21st. Now, of course, all of us are going, ha, we knew it. Lasso is done. Just like Rock Candy Sweet before her and so many other, initial variations of what would eventually become another titled album. Lana seems to have a pattern here, and I do think that is quite comical at this point. But, I will say, I thought Lasso was a pretty, succinct and iconic title for a Lana Del Rey record, especially since I actually liked the idea that she was going to go full country Americana, even though she already kind of did on Chemtrails. Now it sounds like she might be taking it in a slightly different direction. She's mentioning Southern Gothic influences, which is a little different from classic country folk Americana. There's probably some overlap, but expect maybe a darker, murkier sound, perhaps embedded with some, hip hop sentimentality, like her A$AP Rocky collaborations she's done. And so that makes me wonder what the sound overall is going to sound like. But overall, I obviously am very highly anticipating a new Lana Del Rey project. And then we have some other albums. These are albums I'm not quite as excited about, but I feel like if you're interested, I might just throw them out in case you aren't aware. Alicia Cara has an album coming out called Love and Hyperbole in February. Ollie Alexander, who was the UK entrant for Eurovision in the UK last year, he has an album coming out called Polari. It's actually his first album under his own name. He obviously was a part of Years and Years, which was his own band before that. And interestingly enough, the UK song from Eurovision last year, Dizzy, is on this record. And then we also have, as of filming this, I believe a Bad Bunny record that for some reason is slated to come out on a Sunday, not a Friday. So that's a little strange. And then The Weeknd. The Weeknd has supposedly said that Hurry Up Tomorrow, his next studio album, is coming out in January. And we do have an album covered. We don't have a pre-order, so it's not like 100% feeling official, but I have a feeling it will be coming this month. But otherwise, out of a few other little bands and stuff I'm familiar with, the calendar's still looking very empty. And so let's go through and talk about what are some of the more likely albums that I predict to come from a pop act this year. Top of the list, I have Miss Kesha. I talked about it in my, talked about Katy Perry's flop in 2024 with 143. People are kind of considering Kesha to be the antithesis now of Katy. If you support Kesha, you obviously don't like Katy, and if you support Katy, then you don't like Kesha. It's turned into this stan war. And I'm not going to say that there aren't good reasons to maybe have those kinds of feelings of animosity, but I think it's gotten a little overblown. I don't necessarily know or feel that Kesha is necessarily going to deliver something that is so much more groundbreaking than what Katy Perry can do, but it probably will be better. I'm predicting an album that will have a better Metacritic score. It's not hard score to beat if you're looking at 143. We already have Joyride, and we also have Delusional, which was just released in December. So we're starting to cook. We're starting to get those singles. Joyride finally got a music video. I don't know why it took nearly 6 months for it to come out. Something tells me Kesha wasn't actually fully ready to start the era until closer to Christmas, and she just got that song out way early. But I predict sometime in the springtime, probably in the spring, maybe like April, May, I am predicting Kesha to give us I believe her fifth studio album. No, is it her fifth or her sixth? Again, it depends if you consider Annibal and Cannibal separate records. So that is a very likely thing to happen. And I'm obviously looking for it being a benchmark pop staple. It was more experimental last time around with Gag Order. I actually didn't review it on this channel. I have mixed feelings on that record. I like some of what it was doing, but I also think that there are some great songs on that project. Lady Gaga. We got to talk about Lady Gaga, okay? I have some concerns. In a September article interview with Vogue, Lady Gaga basically confirmed that LG7 is coming in February. And of course, that was also when she confirmed Disease was coming out at the end of October. A lot has changed since not only September, but when that interview was held. It was probably written for Vogue back in the summer, earlier in the summer, before possibly even the Venice premiere of Joker 2. Which was when the critics first got a look at that thing. Yeah, Lady Gaga has had a really unfortunate fall. If you lived under a rock, Joker 2, well, it was kind of the biggest crash and burn film, not only of 2024, but if you look at the last 5 years of Hollywood, it's kind of like nothing has crashed and burned quite like Joker 2. Just critically and commercially, it was just an absolute bomb. A real stinker and a real stain on Lady Gaga's acting career. But of course, acting and, Hollywood and the music industry are different things, even though especially an aspiring actress like Lady Gaga might want to kind of view them as somewhat intertwined. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous at the lack of activity that we have seen from Stephanie after Disease came out. I mean, I was nervous that Disease was even going to come out back when it came out at the end of October. But I still kind of felt like she did promise it, and if she backed out away from that, it would probably create more harm than good. But this album that's supposed to come out in February, now I'm starting to wonder if that may be delayed. I hope it's not canceled. I think that's very unlikely, but, you never know with Stephanie these days. It doesn't really feel like her heart is fully in pop music anymore, and Disease fell off a cliff after having a decent debut. It wasn't great. It wasn't as high as I think Little Monsters would have liked. But we all have to contend with the reality that Lady Gaga has not had a solo hit since 2011, and that Lady Gaga is not really something that in her pop lane is going to necessarily cater to what Gen Z is listening to these days, what's trending on the radio. I just don't think Lady Gaga and that especially sort of throwback electropop sound that she's channeling with Disease, it's just not really something that I think is going to suit mainstream radio today very well. I don't like it. I wish we lived in an ecosystem where Disease could do better, but I think we're living in an ecosystem where a different kind of pop song is prevailing. Something a little more Sabrina Carpenter, a little more Olivia Rodrigo. And so, I don't know. This edgy avant-garde electro-pop stuff, it's so 2010, and I'm not entirely sure if it can hold in 2025 or 2024. But I might be, over-exaggerating a bit here. I really do hope that LG7 happens this year, but more importantly, sooner rather than later. And I really hope that Lady Gaga is not, completely in crisis mode over, how to strategize rolling out this project. If anything, I think it was actually a good thing that she was planning on putting out this album so close to Joker 2, which I initially thought was a horrible idea because I thought Joker 2 was going to have an awards campaign. But that is dead and buried. I mean, completely dead and buried. So there's no chance of anything awards wise. This is the perfect time for her to take the attention away from it and fully focus it on what is hopefully a more critically acclaimed project, which is her new album. Now, if the album doesn't get good critical acclaim, that's a problem. And of course, doesn't commercially sell. That is a problem, but I think Lady Gaga's being realistic and expecting what she's going to get. She's always had her critics. You know, art pop was torn apart, and now critics are saying, well, we might have misunderstood it. And so even Born This Way, I remember being in high school and reading some not so favorable reviews of Born This Way and thinking, these critics don't know anything about pop music. Like they're so up on their high hipster horse. I can't take it. So Lady Gaga's always had a rough time with critics, particularly when a new initial release happens. It's always after the fact that the critics come around and say, "Oh, this was a staple. This was a masterpiece." So my big concern is LG7 even coming in February? It's already the beginning of January, and I'm going to be honest with you, I thought we'd have more information about it by now. I really did. Her silence right now is a little worrying. She did put out acoustic versions of Disease back in November. She was trying to ride Disease's little promo cycle. But now it's been over a month, and I know it's been the holidays, and this is traditionally a time where artists go quiet, but I'm still knowing her, I'm a little worried. I feel like when an album is only a month or a little over a month away from Stephanie, we know more about it. But if you look at Joanne, I believe Joanne was only announced title, album cover, pre-order 2 or 3 weeks before its release. So it might be a similar thing here where like at the end of January, we get the next single, we get the album pre-order, all of that starts moving, and the album's only 2 or 3 weeks out from that date. We don't have like a really long album campaign like for Born This Way, for example, where we knew the album release date back in, I think she released it on New Year's Eve of 2011. Or New Year's Day of 2011. That was like 5 months in advance, 6 months in advance. So we'll see how things roll out here with that. But I am a little concerned. Speaking of pop girls who are doing pretty well, Addison Rae, her debut album is now hotly anticipated by moi. After hearing Aquamarine and going back and finally paying attention to Diet Pepsi, I completely am drinking what Addison Rae is serving us, and I am very, very excited to see what AR1, that is what we're tentatively calling it. I actually really hope she doesn't call the album AR1. I don't like this sort of lazy album title gimmick that certain artists are getting a little too comfortable with. Given an actual title, okay? Like, let's make a concept here. But given that, I really think the songs will slap. I just have this feeling that this album isn't going to let us down. But I'm also a little nervous that the album's ever going to come, or that it might just end up being an EP. It feels like Addison Rae's tried to sort of start and stop over and over again a little bit in the last several years. And so, although it's still all things are pointing go, we are getting an album this year, I do think we're probably going to get even one more single before we actually get the announcement of it. Something tells me she's really going to rock a ton of singles before she even announces the title and the release date. But we'll see. I'm hoping it's sooner in the year rather than later. Definitely by this summer. I have a good feeling about that. We got to talk about Taylor Swift. Because, it isn't an album predictions video if you don't predict Taylor releasing something. Taylor hasn't had a year where she hasn't put out some body of work since 2018, almost 7 years ago at this point. So, it's a little bit like, all right, Taylor's going to put out something. And what is that something? It's probably Reputation, Taylor's version. Also, maybe her debut. I'm going to be honest. This is a hot take potentially, but I think more and more Swifties are probably in agreement about this. I really think it was a mistake for Taylor not to capitalize on the Eras Tour and release all of the remaining re-recordings during its run. The Eras Tour is now over as of December, and we didn't even get an announcement about Reputation like I had hoped we would on the last couple shows. Even if she wasn't going to release it during the run of the shows, she would at least announce it during it. But that didn't happen either. I had thought that Reputation, since it's sort of a winter kind of themed album in my mind, it's definitely more of a winter. Some people would argue it's summer. I argue it's more winter vibes. It's a different kind of, it's an extroverted winter album, whereas like Evermore is an introverted winter album, if that makes any sense. It's the other side of the winter themed coin. Um, but I wonder if Taylor is potentially kind of like, I don't know, do I even want to do this anymore? It's been on my mind for a little bit now, and I'm like, what if Taylor just doesn't release Rep and debut Taylor's versions? Or what if she doesn't release them at all this year and they come out a lot later than we initially thought? Um, I don't know. I think, I still think it's likely that she will, and they will come this year, particularly Reputation. But the more time that's passed since 2019, when she was inspired to do this in the begin with, which is 6 years ago now, almost 6 years ago, I'm starting to wonder if she's like, I don't know, I kind of want to move on. Because to be honest, it is a huge amount of resources and kind of time that is spent on something that I think she just wants to move on from. And I also could see Taylor kind of looking at her catalog and going, well, let's be honest. I re-recorded 4 out of the 6, which is a huge feat in its own right. I also released all of these additional songs. And she also kind of did do the greatest hits. She picked the 4, best albums out of that bunch. Reputation, I know that it sold well, but it wasn't nearly as critically acclaimed as 1989, all of those other records. And then Debut, I mean, I don't even think Taylor cares about that album anymore, as evidenced by the fact that it didn't even get a section at the Eras Tour besides our song appearing on a few surprise song sets. So something tells me that she's okay with potentially just like letting those go, because I think she's got so many other projects going at the same time. I mean, Taylor Swift fans will tell you that she is currently not only finishing up getting ready to release the re-recordings of both Reputation and Debut, but that she's also working on a movie with Searchlight Pictures that she's currently writing the screenplay for and going to direct, that she is working on TS13, her 13th studio album, and she's putting out another documentary about the Eras Tour. All the while falling in love with Travis Kelce, going to all those frickin' football games. I really hope the Chiefs are not in the Super Bowl this year. Please do not let the Chiefs be in the Super Bowl. I'm saying that also as an Eagles fan because, I want the Eagles to go through. But I do not think it would be good for Taylor, for the exposure of it, to have her be recreating what the Super Bowl was for her and Travis last year. To have that 2 years in a row, you don't want to test that with the public. I think that that's going to start putting a bitter taste in not just football fans' mouths, but like everyone's mouths. Last football season was the season of Taylor. Let's pull back a little from the Taylor and Travis stuff because it's a little much. It's beyond a little much. But Taylor is just so goddamn busy. Not to mention, she just finished a 2-year tour with like over 100 shows for 3 hours, where she is performing like 50 songs. The stamina, she deserves to rest for like 2 years after that tour. Doesn't she want to start a family? I'm just like, where is the time for these projects? I'm starting to, I don't know. I'm wondering if Taylor's kind of like, I don't know. Maybe this just won't happen anymore. I think it will. I think at the very least, we will probably get Reputation this year, but I'm not putting the same level of expectation on it that I have in previous years. And to be completely honest with you, I'm not the hugest Reputation fan of Taylor's, so I'm okay with the album being skipped. She picked the 4 best albums to re-record, in my opinion, even though 1989 was done so dirty by Jack Antonoff. But anyway, yeah, I gotta be honest with y'all. I don't know. At a certain point, maybe she just wants to move on. I know maybe Swifties will be like, how could you suggest she would not finish what she started? But I always wondered when she announced this that, all 6 albums she was going to re record. Like, really? How long of a time period was this going to take? And I also do feel like that, like, the window is sort of passed. Like, I know she couldn't legally re-record 19 Reputation until um, 2022 or at least November of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Which was more recent, but she could have still put it out. I really think Tortured Poets. She just shouldn't have done Tortured Poets. If I think last year she should have just finished up the re-recordings with the Eras tour. Let that all be sort of like, one and done. We're good, and then Tortured Poets could have come out this year. That way there would be a gap, and there wouldn't be like an Album of the Year nomination twice in a row for the Grammys, which I don't love, and all these things. I just don't know why Taylor decided to do that. She, while she was in the middle of the Eras tour, decided to make another section that was already an overlong tour where she had to take out fan favorites to fit in new songs. I didn't understand the decision there. So we'll see. But that's starting to become my gut feeling. I mean, maybe Reputation is imminent. I just don't feel it anymore. I feel like Taylor's going to be on a little bit of a break for a little bit until at least the spring. I feel like she's going to sort of, besides the Super Bowl stuff and the Grammys coming up, I think Taylor's going to want to, maybe she announces it at the Grammys. Again, I mean, it's like, I think at a certain point people are going to just roll their eyes. But then again, the album is called Reputation. Why not put it out? She's waiting for the time, for the moment when her reputation is at its lowest, like it was in 2017. I don't know. All right, so we'll see what happens with Taylor. But I mean, I would bet a lot of money that something's coming from her. I mean, there's a possibility it's TS13. I hope not. Girl, we need. That's too much. You put out basically 2 albums in 2024 with Tortured Poets. I mean, that was a double album, and we've got flooded with music. Lil Nas X. What is going on with Lil Nas X? Well, it looks like he read the tea leaves about his comeback single from a year ago, J Christ, which was panned kind of universally. And so he's decided a new approach, and he's come back with his song Light Again, which I think is infinitely better. It has me a lot more excited about the sound and direction of Lil Nas X's second album, whenever it may come. Maybe it's a mixtape, maybe it's an EP, who knows. He technically already has an EP out, by the way. It came out before Montero, but I think Lil Nas X will give us something, and I think it's going to be called Dream Boy, because he seems to be teasing the era as the era of Dream Boy. So I would bet money on this project being called that, even though it hasn't officially been labeled as such. Chappell Roan. She hasn't put out an album since October of 2023, so I'm looking at 2025. I'm looking at Good Luck Babe and its success, not to mention the new song she performed on SNL a couple months ago, and I'm like, I'm assuming Chappell Roan's going to put out a new project this year. I don't know when. It could be later in the year, but I would assume that she is going to want to have her big sophomore moment, although will it be as universally loved and successful as her first? I think it will be. I think Chappell Roan is still going to be riding high for at least another year or two, possibly longer. Harry Styles. I actually do have a probably not too outlandish theory that Harry was actually planning to return to pop music like this November, kind of like around now. But the tragic death of his former bandmate Liam Payne had him push everything back, which is totally understandable. And there's a possibility that things may get pushed back even further than just to the beginning of 2025. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that at the Grammys there is, and definitely at the Brit Awards, I'm assuming there is going to be some sort of tribute that may have all of the 1D members together on stage. And so I think during these award shows, we're going to be seeing, I'd be very shocked if neither the Brits or the Grammys have any sort of tribute. I mean, obviously they'll put up an in memoriam, but I'm talking about like having the actual One Direction boys together on stage performing a song. I would be very shocked if it didn't happen for either of those two award ceremonies. You know, some may say it's still a little too close to home for them to be on stage like that. It will have been several months, you know, it will have been several months. They'll have had time to prepare and process. I think it would be very, very cathartic for the fans, although it would be very heartbreaking. I definitely want to see it. And so sometime in 2025, I assume we are going to see some sort of group reunion from that group. I'm assuming Liam Payne obviously had his own private funeral already, but there will be some form of like public mourning for him at some point. I mean, maybe it'll be as far away as a year from like the date he died, like next fall. I don't know, but you know, I would assume. But otherwise, I would assume that Harry Styles, following his pattern of 2 to 3 years between albums, he would be due for this year for his fourth studio record. So I would assume he put something out. We shall see. Marina and the Diamonds, or Marina as she now goes. I really wish she kept the Diamonds. I really wish she did. Marina put out a poetry book last year, and she teased and hinted at releasing a new album in 2025. And I believe her. I have a good feeling that we will see Marina back. It's been 4 years now since Ancient Dreams in a Modern Land, and I am very much looking forward to seeing where she goes from there. Lorde, I don't know if it's really easy to believe what Lorde says these days about putting out music soon. She's sort of in that camp of artists who use the word soon very liberally. Um, we'll see. It'll be 4 years, similar like Marina, since Solar Power. This is what I'm talking about like huge gaps. Lorde is only on her fourth studio album. She's only 10 years into her career, and she's already acting like she's putting out albums at a frequency that you see peers of hers like a lot older doing. And so I find that very interesting. And so I think I feel pretty good about Lorde coming back this year, but I wouldn't say it's as sure as some of the other artists I just mentioned. Halle Bailey, I really hope that we get a debut from her. She's put out a couple songs, one in particular called Angel, way back in 2023. I really hope we see a full length debut from her. Chloe has already put out 2 albums. So Halle's a little behind, but Halle's been an actress. She's been in projects, and she's also a mother. So I would expect things to take a little longer. But that being said, I would expect a project from her this year at some point. Similarly, Jade Thirdwall from Little Mix has been putting out some banger singles that have been doing really well on the charts. And that leads me to think that we will be seeing a debut from her in the new year as well. Nicki Minaj did say, I don't know how long ago this was, on Twitter, that she was planning on putting out Pink Friday 2, or Pink Friday 3 or something along those lines. And it was kind of like, we're milking something to death. We really are. And then she clarified, and she says it's not coming till 2025. Whatever the next studio project, whatever mixtape, whatever it is that Nicki releases, I think there's a decent chance that it will be this year. But knowing Nicki as well and how long it took between Queen and Pink Friday 2, that was a 5-year gap. I wouldn't be surprised. She said shit before and then kicked it down the can, much like, how Rihanna has. Notice Rihanna is not on this list. Rihanna, she's been on my list every other year. This point, I've fully given up on Rihanna. I think we all need to fully give up on Rihanna, okay? If she does decide to come back, she will. But we got to stop predicting it. We got to stop predicting it because we just looking like damn fools. And she's laughing at us for it. So yeah, Rihanna's just happily retired on her, island in Turks and Caicos or whatever, she's just rolling in that beauty brand money, with her children. Miley Cyrus. Miley talked about in a recent interview with a magazine, can't remember which, that she has a new body of work that she wants to put out in 2025. So I think there's a very good chance that will happen. And I, hopefully it's a little bit of an improvement over Endless Summer Vacation. I think Tuvelo has a good chance of coming back. She's never really gone, even if she doesn't put out an album, she's always putting out collabs. She's always like, a million different places on the radio. But I think that, we haven't gotten technically an album from her since 2022. So I think there's a good chance that following her pattern, we'll see something in 25. Demi Lovato has talked about putting out a new album next year. It's been a slight minute, though she did do Revamped in 2023. Again, she's also since 2022 with her last album, which was very much heavy rock. And I think Demi's finally going back in the pop R&B direction, which I would prefer. I like the rock sound for her, but I also kind of don't want her to just stay in that lane. I like her kind of almost going back and forth. Delta Goodrum has put out one or two songs in the last year and has me hoping, it's also been 4 years since we got her last record, that the Aussie pop star will deliver something for us. I think there's a decent chance that we get some Delta Goodrum this year. An artist who is not on the caliber of any of these in terms of popularity, but I just want to shout out, is Uriel. She is a British classical crossover singer who has this really ethereal voice. She's definitely the student of Enya, if anything. She has put out a slew of new singles over the last several months, definitely gearing up, as she has talked about on her social media, for a new album. So I expect that to come in 2025, and I will be very excited to hear. Florence and the Machine. I would say there's a good chance that Florence will come in 2025, but then I also worry that Florence is someone who's going to start taking longer and longer gaps. She had a really long gap between Highest Hope and Dance Fever, and so that was at least 4 years, and something tells me it's going to be at least another 4 years before her 6th studio album. But we'll see. She was also working on that Great Gatsby play, which I believe is already now out on the West End and stuff, but I haven't really seen any promo for it. So I don't know if that's all done. I know she had been working on that. So maybe she's fully, able to get going on that project on Florence and the Machine 6, because we need it. Another artist that I forgot to mention has a confirmed album is JoJo. She has an album called Not Gonna Lie, which has a song that was on my best songs of the year list, Porcelain Reimagined. That is slated to come out in just 2 weeks. Very much looking forward to that. It's only 8 songs, so it's like a mini album, but I'm very excited to see. JoJo always needs to come back and prove herself, because she was done so dirty by the music industry when she was possibly going to make it big. Cardi B. I feel like Cardi B is starting to get into the Rihanna territory, where it's like, girl, what's going on? It has been so long since her debut album. When I tell you that I would have never believed that there would be this long of a gap between Invasion of Privacy and whatever the fuck her next album's going to be. I mean, it's inconceivable. She was so hot. She was such an it thing. And then she put out a ton of songs into the pandemic, through the pandemic. She's been putting out songs. Even this year, she put out some new songs. She's constantly putting out singles. She's basically put out an entire album's worth of singles. But there's never been an album, not even an EP. I don't know what's going on with that. I think it would be hilarious if she did put some of those very old songs from 2020 and 2021 on a 2025 album. But look at Jason Derulo with his latest project. He basically just said, put them all on. So I don't know, Cardi B would troll us and do the same thing for the streams. But it's just crazy at this point. I think, and she gets upset when fans ask her about it, but it's like, we have a right to be like we feel a little gaslit. Like, just be honest with us. Are you too busy to put this, to make this happen? She wouldn't be alone in being like a one-hit wonder female rap artist to put out an album. Lauryn Hill only put out one studio album. Lil Mama only put out one studio album. I mean, it happens, these female MCs, they don't always pop off. So I don't know if that's going to be Cardi B. I'm going to be honest with you. Me personally, she can keep it. I personally do not need to hear more Cardi B music. But, as someone who follows pop culture, I recognize how significant it would be when she comes back. So you won't see me reviewing it on this channel, but I just felt like I'd give it a shout out. Yeah, Emily Sandé put out a song recently. She was talking about a new project in 2025. I think there's a pretty good chance. She's actually pretty prolific these days. And she had a huge gap between her first and second album. And then it was like, suddenly it was like, we're cranking these out like hotcakes. And then Madison Beer, she also recently confirmed that she wants to put out a new album in 2025. All right, so I've gone through all of the most likely predictions. Now I want to go through some ones that I am a little bit more kind of unsure about, but I'm still hoping for. What happened to Jessie J? What happened to Jessie J? There were rumors, and there were ideas of a single that was supposed to come out, and it never did. And it was supposed to be like a big comeback for her, and I just don't. But that was a couple years ago, and then she's put out like one song in the last 5 years. I don't know what's going on, but I do know I did have a child, and there's been a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with her. So I do sometimes wonder if some of these artists take Leona Lewis too. Leona Lewis has just kind of for all intents and purposes, retired. These artists are way too young to be throwing in the towel. But I just, unfortunately, the record labels just don't see a worthwhile investment. And I guess the artists themselves are like, it's okay, we had a good run, but they're not going to try anymore. They're not going to try anymore. And it's really sad. I really want to see a Leona Lewis project. I want to see a Jessie J project, but the demand ain't there. I don't know what to say. Madonna is a big question mark. It has been the longest gap ever between Madonna records, especially as of now being in 2025. But that is very understandable. Madonna is going to be turning 67 this year. So for someone of her age, I obviously don't expect her to be cranking out albums like she used to. I would honestly be more interested at this point in seeing her make her biopic. That is almost something I would rather see her focus on right now. But I know that biopic has been going through development hell for many years. And I understand Madonna being very protective over it because, we've seen a lot of biopics come out in Hollywood that are less than what they should be because the artists didn't care so much about protecting their image. And so I think Madonna is going to be very protective over it, rightfully so. And there's just been a lot of back and forth with the studio, and I don't know if it's back on. I think I read somewhere that it might be. And then I've also read things where it's just indefinitely on hold. But I think Madonna has been quietly recording. I've seen the rumors about the Stuart Price collabs, the Stuart Price studio sessions, and let me tell you, my heart does flutter at that. If we get a Confessions of a Dance Floor kind of resurgence for her, that would be really exciting. Although, at her age now, I really would love to see a slightly more mature album. She doesn't have to go full Barbara Streisand, but something with a little more balance. And I actually thought Madam X did strike a little bit of that. But, I would kind of like to see something a little more mature. And of course, not to bring up Ray of Light, but, it would be nice to go out on an album that's on that level. Because there's a very good chance that, it may be whatever her next album is, it might be her last original studio album. It's very possible. Stevie Nicks actually isn't probably as unlikely as because she just put out a song called The Lighthouse, and she performed it on SNL. I mean, if Stevie Nicks is doing SNL performances and she has this big new single, it makes me think she might be putting out a new album. It has been a minute since Stevie Nicks put out an album, so that would be really cool. Of Monsters and Men, they're an Icelandic band who, believe it or not, have not actually put out an album since 2019, even though they did put out an EP in 2022. And then, of course, Nana, Hilmer's daughter, was the lead vocalist. She put out an album in 2023 of solo material. But I think, there is been movement of them working together as a band on new material. So I really do hope that we get a new album from them. I forgot to mention Mumford and Sons. They've been off for a minute as well. Again, I don't know. They put out a song last year. I don't know if that signals a new record from them. Mariah Carey. We've seen Mariah kind of hint at it. We've heard hints and inspirations of being a gospel record, a rock record. There's been a lot of different, genres thrown around with Mariah Carey's comeback, but it's been a minute. It's been 6 years, and Mariah is getting up there too. So I forgive her slowing down a little bit, but it's about damn time. It's about damn time. Speaking of about damn time, Lizzo. I would wonder if maybe after 3 years, we would get a new Lizzo project. But Lizzo's been sort of dealing with a lot of controversy due to these lawsuits that she's been dealing with from her own backup dancers and people who work with her on her tours and stuff. So she's been kind of going through it, and I think it's forced her to sort of seriously retreat back. And so I am not 100% confident that Lizzo feels confident enough to put out any new music right now. Grimes. Oh, Grimes. I'm sorry, but whenever I think of Grimes now, I just get really sad. And I shouldn't be, because I think Grimes is in a pretty good place right now. All things considered. All things considered. I believe she might be dating Anima, the DJ. They have a song together called Welcome to the Opera. If that's old tea, let me know, because I think that might be old tea. Maybe they're just good friends now, but I thought they were potentially in a partnership. Obviously, he who must not be named got his grubby hands on her, and I'll never forgive him for it. Grimes, if you're not aware, has been unfortunately dealing with a legal battle of custody over her sons that they had via surrogate, Elon Musk. I'm talking about Elon. Obviously, Grimes and Elon have been separated for, I believe, almost 3 years, and not on good speaking terms. And based on the downward trajectory of Elon today, I would look very, very side-eye Grimes if she was on good speaking terms with him. I mean, Grimes must just feel so... I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to shame her too much, because it's not my business, it's not my life, but I never understood why she was with him in the first place. Even though 2018 Elon was not nearly as problematic of a figure as he is today, I still thought he gave me the ick, in not just in terms of the fact that he's unattractive, but that his vibe and persona was just not a good mesh with kind of what Grimes was about. And so, yes, they loved nerding out about deep space travel and AI, but deeper than that, I just was like, this is so incongruent. But they had 3 children together. So no wonder Grimes hasn't put out a new project in 5 years. She has been a mother. She's been mothering 3 children. She doesn't have time. And so Grimes has periodically popped back on Twitter to sort of clear the air and say, yeah, I'm in a better space now. I'm going to start working more. I acknowledge it's not where is book 1? She announced that 3 years ago. And it's just is that even happening? Are Player of Games and Shinigami Eyes, are those songs just completely tossed to the wayside now? Are they ever going to be on this whatever next album is going to be? I'm starting to lose a little bit of faith in Grimes producing a new body of work anytime soon, because her personal life is just so complicated right now and probably very stressful. It's great that she is, now doing some more performances. She was just at the Las Vegas Sphere with Anima, which is pretty cool. And she did put out a couple songs last year, but one of those songs was actually for Anima's record. I don't actually think that was for hers. And so I don't know what's going on with Grimes at this point, but I honestly would not say it's super likely that she'll put out a new project this year. It's more likely than it was last year, but that's just because of the passage of time. I still have it an under 50% chance of happening, which is really sad because, a few years ago, I thought it would have been a very high chance. I just didn't realize how messy that situation was. And it's Elon Musk's fault. It's Elon's fault. So many things are Elon's fault. Victoria Justice. I think I mentioned this in my last year. A lot of these artists appear on these many times. Girl, what are we doing? Why did we put out so many songs in 2023 and 2022 and then just disappear? Like, what are we doing? Come on, stop teasing us. Give us an EP, give us something. I've always been, since 2011, singing Victoria Justice praises and saying she deserves to have her big debut moment, but she's only ever put out an EP in 2013. Where is Victoria Justice's debut? We'll see if it ever happens. All right, I've got two more artists I really want to talk about. Imogen Heap. We did finally get the long teased song, What Have You Done to Me? It is a 6-minute, very experimental song. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Didn't do a whole lot for me. I mean, it's really hard to say this as a very, very ardent Imogen Heap fan. I don't know what it is about the song. I don't know if it's because we're missing the music video, which I know exists because I have seen Instagram story behind the scenes footage of it being filmed back in 2023. So I don't know where the heck that is now. But there's just something about the song I just can't grasp. Every time I listen to it, it's like I completely forget what it sounds like after it's over. And there's just nothing that really draws me back to it. It gets too cacophonous in so many places. I appreciate the experimentality, but I also do feel like for Imogen to have such a comeback, the song needs to be a little more refined, a little bit more streamlined in sort of oral accessibility. I don't know. I'm so brainwashed by pop music that I can't get into an experimental or Imogen Heap track. But for some reason, it just wasn't hitting for me. But I also have to say, when I went on her Instagram, I was seeing recently a lot of people throwing out accusations saying, girl, why are you liking Ben Shapiro tweets on Twitter? You know, like very like side-eye kind of comments saying like, girl, why are you going alt-right? Why is your Twitter like this right now? And I will tell you, I deleted my Twitter in November, officially. Like, I am not on, I know it's called X now, but I refuse to call it that, even though it is an insult to call what X is today Twitter, because Twitter was so much better than whatever the crap is that is X today. But I'm not on there anymore. I'm not tuned into that mess. I mean, I'm over on the mess on Threads. Threads is pretty messy too. Blue Sky, follow me on Blue Sky. It is so much clearer, even though there's not much stuff going on over there yet. I do lament that Blue Sky is not quite taken off yet. But anywho, I am not on there. I don't know what's going on with that, but if anyone wants to enlighten me about why I saw just so many comments on her Instagram recently that were just very like alarmist. I was like, what is going on? You know, like, has Imogen Heap turned into a TERF? Like, there were some things that I was just like, this is concerning. So anywho, there was also some concerns. A lot of it was around, she was promoting this AI vocal software. And a lot of people were, I think, understandably concerned about Imogen's open embrace of AI, similar to Grimes. They've been a little bit more, Grimes has been a little bit more of in favor of it, and especially the music making process, which I think has made a lot of us as artists kind of cringe and go, ooh, I don't know, I don't like this. But in Imogen's defense, I think what she's working on is something that, you know, is not exactly generative. It's more of like a vocal software that is, you know, a tool to help musicians, which is something that's not too different from, you know, programs that already exist that you could consider AI. You know, it's a little different than like generative AI. So I think that there is a bit of a distinction between the kind of stuff she's working on. But I always have felt like Imogen has gotten, for so long now, so swept up in technology that she's just completely lost and forgotten like the initial creative spark of writing a song. She's so swept up in it was the gloves and, you know, it's this audio visual stuff. And I mean, to be fair, like blockchain, like she was trying to decentralize music ownership. She's been doing a lot of stuff. none of it seems to really fully materialize, but she's always got her hand in different pots in the tech space, and I respect her for that. But at the same time, I'm like, girl, can you just go to that studio, that little nookie studio you have in the shires of England, and just put out an ellipse? Can you just put out another one of those? Just even if there's just one more. It's been so long. It's been over a decade since Sparks, and Sparks in itself felt very much like a long journey to get to its fruition. And so I don't know if saying Imogen Heap putting out a new album in 2025 is like a good prediction, is something worth saying, because it feels very unlikely. Um, but we'll see. We shall see. However, there is one artist that I am probably staking more hope than any on putting out new work in 2025. Like, it is so important to me that this artist resurfaces after so long that I will just be so dismayed if the entire year goes by and nothing comes of it. And that artist is the one and only Enya. It will be 10 years since her last album, Dark Sky Island, in this November. And if you look at Enya's track record, she seems to like the fives. In 1995, she put out The Memory of Trees. In 2005, she put out Amarantine. And in 2015, she put out Dark Sky Island. Things are syncing up for 2025. This is also the longest gap Enya has ever taken. Now, again, she is a little bit older. She's a little younger than Madonna. She's a couple years younger, but she's still in her 60s. So I will forgive her that, along with her collaborators who are even older than her. But it's damn time. It is time to hear those blissed out vocal harmonies. What the world needs now more than anything is a new Enya record. I have seen a lot of speculation it's going to be her ninth. There's a lot of speculation on the fan forums. I have seen some conflicting evidence, but I do think that the evidence overall that is pointing to a new record sometime soon is stronger than the evidence against it. The evidence I've seen for it is most glaringly in the liner notes of the 2023 re-release of A Box Full of Dreams. In there, Nikki Ryan mentions we're back in the studio making music now that the pandemic's over. And in there, Enya also says, "See you again soon" in Irish. So that is probably the clearest indication that there's something coming. Now, I've heard a lot of interesting fan theories. One theory is that she's actually going to put out a trilogy of albums, and that's not just one, that she's going to really make up for lost time by putting out like a bunch of albums. I think that's a little too good to be true, okay? This is Enya we're talking about. She takes like a year to write one song, okay? Especially these days. So I wouldn't necessarily expect more than one album, but I think this is the first year that I can really say, because I predicted Enya for like half a decade now. Every year I hope for it. But I think this is the first year I can really say there's a dang good chance. Like, I think we're over the 50% chance mark now. It's a stronger than 50% chance that she will deliver. Of course, it will be at the end of the year, because she almost always does. I mean, she hasn't put out an album that's not been in the Christmas season since 1988. So it's always going to be around Christmas. That's almost a guarantee, which is fine. We'll have to wait, throughout the rest of the year. But I am going to be anticipating something like crazy. I mean, it's possible that it could also be something like I could imagine her maybe putting out a live orchestrated album of her greatest hits that is recorded. She's probably never going to go on tour, but one thing I could see her doing is like putting out like a DVD of like a filmed performance of her performing with an orchestra on stage. And I could see her putting out like a live album like that. That is something I've always wondered she might do. Maybe there'd be like some new covers on there, but not necessarily new material. It is also possible that she purely does a covers record, goes back to the Celtic stuff. I don't know. I hope that it's a bit of both. I hope that whatever her new record has, it's got a lot of new material and then maybe a couple covers like her old music has been. But yeah, we need that. We need that new Enya record. I mean, especially considering where the world is today. Please, please, universe. On that note, speaking of another enigmatic, reclusive artist, I do want to just also give a nod to two artists, actually. One is Amethystium, the Norwegian electronic composer. I've mentioned him countless times in these videos. He hasn't put out an album in 10 years. He put out a new song in 2022, and he mentioned that there wasn't still an album ready to be released, but this was something from it to tide us over. And so I just wonder what kind of timescales we're looking at. You know, are we going to actually maybe get a new Amethystium project this year? That would be incredible. And then the other one is Enigma. I've also seen a lot of Enigma fan sites postulating about a comeback. You know, it'll be 9 years this year from his last album, and he is older. Not that much older, but you know, he is a bit older. I actually have an Enigma ranking video that was supposed to come out last year, but got buried on all the other things I needed to do. And I do have it slated to come out sometime in the next month. I'm going to put that video out. So that's been on the burner for a little bit. I am going to put out an Enigma ranking video, top 25 Enigma songs. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, so there's always that. Björk, I think it's a little soon to expect Björk. I mean, you know, she's getting older, and I don't necessarily expect her to crank out albums. You know, it was late 2022 that we got Fosora. And so for Björk, I would say maybe 2026 is a better bet. I still really love the idea of a water-themed album with a lot of harp. That is definitely the fan theory that has me the most excited. I wouldn't say it's completely out of the question for this year. I'm not so sold on it. But yeah, no, overall, I hope this is a good year. I think that, you know, last year we did have a lot of heavy hitters. I mean, we had Dua Lipa, Billie Eilish, Sabrina Carpenter, Taylor Swift, Beyonce. Oh, Beyonce. How can I forget? I knew there was one other artist I wanted to talk about. A lot of people think Act 3 is coming in 2025. I can't say refutably no, but it just doesn't seem right to me. I think we are going to get a world tour for Cowboy Carter in 2025, possibly some visuals, probably not, but possibly. And Act 3 will come out in 2026. That is my bet. And the reason why I think that is because there was a gap between Renaissance of 2 years and Cowboy Carter. Why would she suddenly have such a smaller gap between the next album? Also, people have suggested that this Act 1, 2, and 3 might be a swan song for Beyonce and her career. And if that's the case, I don't necessarily see Beyonce wanting to rush through it. If there really are only 3 acts, why rush through them so quickly? You know, spread it out a little bit more. So that's another reason why I feel like Act 3 is not coming this year. I could be wrong. I did see the Beyonce Bowl, the halftime show for the Christmas Day NFL halftime show she put on. I didn't expect anything less. It was a wonderfully choreographed presentation, doing the synchronicity of it all. The magic of what, you know, the culture she is in touch with is just so infectious on screen. And you watch it and you just are like, this is why I love pop music. This is why I am just such a student of particularly pop female artists. It's just so captivating to watch. And so I expect big things from Beyonce in 2025, but I'm just not 100% sure about Act 3, which a lot of people think is going to be rock and roll influenced. Also, why is the Renaissance film still not on a streaming service? Will it ever come? Who knows? All right, so yeah, I think I've said all I need. I mean, the other Bruno Mars, maybe he might put something out. He seems to be doing collabs. I don't know if he's interested. Adele, if she feels like it, it will have been 4 years. It will have been 4 years since 30. So maybe Adele. I would definitely put a question mark there. Ellie Goulding, maybe. I saw she has a collab with Anima coming out. Um, there's a bunch of artists I could name, but overall, we'll see. We'll just see. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a lot more artists releasing albums this year that just released albums last year. Like, I'd almost be less surprised about Olivia Rodrigo putting out a new album this year, or even Billie Eilish, than if someone like Florence and the Machine decided to finally come back. Like I said, it's like we've got the artists who are like working a little faster and the artists who are working a lot slower, and the gap is widening. And you got artists who are on either side of that camp. And so I don't know what to say to that. But I really hope, 2025, let's have a good year for music. I want this to be, I have good feelings about this year. I really do. But I do worry that it could be a little bit of a drought year. So I'm hoping that's not the case, because 2015 was an incredible year for music. I keep thinking back to 2015, 10 years ago. And so that just makes me think the fives cannot let us down. So we shall see. What albums are you most excited for in 2025? Are there any artists I didn't mention that have either confirmed or you just are hoping for? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Please give this a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you all in my next video. I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed start to your new year. Peace, love, and light. Bye.